Welcome back to Power and Politics. The federal government is moving to cap the number of handguns in Canada. New legislation proposes what's being called a national freeze on the purchase and import of handguns. It would also remove firearm licenses from those involved in acts of domestic violence. Tougher penalties for gun smuggling and trafficking are also part of the bill. Marco Mendicino is the Minister of Public Safety. He joins us now in Ottawa. Hi, Minister. Good to have you with us. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you, Vashi.
Minister, will your government ever introduce a full national ban on handguns?
Well, we're always going to be prepared to look at all options, but today was a significant stride in that direction because, as you, I think, very succinctly summarized, we are going to make on a go forward illegal the buying, the selling, the importing, the transferring of handguns right across the country. This is the product of advice which we've received from law enforcement, from survivors, from stakeholders right across the continuum. It's an impactful step. It's an effective step at addressing the alarming increase between handguns and violence in our communities. So still a lot of work to do. We want to get the bill passed, but we're prepared to do it.
If those are the objectives where handguns are concerned, again, why not introduce a ban? Why just a freeze?
Because we listened very carefully. We listened carefully to those members of the law enforcement who understand how to get at gun violence. We listened very carefully to those individuals who have been impacted in indescribably difficult ways by gun violence. We listened very carefully to colleagues across the entire political spectrum. And we believe that this is a very significant step, the largest probably in a generation when it comes to gun policy. What you heard today, Vashi, is that year over year, we average of about 55,000 new registered handguns per year over the last 10 years. At the same time, we've seen handgun violence go up. They're used in about 75% of all serious offenses, 60% homicides. So by putting in place these measures, we hope to have a direct impact on the amount of handgun violence that we've seen in our communities and make communities safer.
And I certainly understand that objective. What I'm trying to ascertain is when you say that you listen to all those various stakeholders, did they tell you specifically we would like a freeze and not a ban? Because many of the people you spoke of, I've also listened to. I've interviewed on the show, for example, parents who saw their kids gunned down in the Danforth shooting, and they were very specifically advocating for a national handgun ban. Never once did I hear them say, you know what, a freeze, that's all right, that'll do.
You're right, they did. And I listened to them as well. And it's probably some of the most difficult and yet inspiring conversations that I've had as a person. And what we want to do is we want to be able to take quick, decisive action. And that's why we tabled this legislation today. That's why at the same time we introduced regulations which will allow us to bring in the effect of making it illegal to, again, buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns as quickly as possible. And I'm calling on all MPs and all parliamentarians to pass this bill as quickly as possible. I will take a call 24/7 to get there.
I just want to I want to move on, but quickly, am I to interpret from that this is more the freeze is more politically palatable, and therefore you move ahead with that because you think you can get it done versus a ban which you don't believe is politically palatable?
This has nothing to do with politics. This is not about partisanship today. It's about what we can implement quickly and effectively. And we believe that by taking this significant stride against handguns, that we are going to reduce handgun violence. But it's part of a very comprehensive strategy, which includes Bill C-21 and other measures to reduce gender-based violence, to take on organized crime. It involves also investing in law enforcement. It involves also in addressing gun crimes at their root cause. And we have to do all these things together to truly eradicate gun violence.
You also spoke in the question and answer portion of the announcement around the buyback program, where it refers to assault-style firearms, which your government announced a ban on back in May of 2020. I believe you said that the first phase would be imminently launched. The Prime Minister has now twice promised to launch this buyback program in the coming months. Why should Canadians believe that it actually will imminently start as you characterized it?
Because we're going to make good on it, because AR-15s have no place in our communities. And look, I am just as eager and anxious as you and everybody watching to get these guns out of our communities. At the same time, the buyback program is the first ever of its kind in this country. We have to be sure that we properly consult with the industry, which we're going to do imminently. We're going to publish more details of that this summer. And then we have every intention of beginning the buyback process by the end of this year. You heard me say it. You heard the Prime Minister say it. I know, Vashi, that you will follow up and say, we've heard this before. We know it's hard, but we're going to get it done.
Respectfully, why did it take 2.5 years? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. Your government made a big deal about making this announcement. You talk about the goal being safer communities. If in fact the buyback program will result in those objectives being met, why not make it a bigger priority? Why has it taken this long? I mean, you're looking at 2.5 years before even this, you characterized it, I think it's just the start of it, right? Just some of the weapons will start being bought back by the end of this year. That's 2.5 years.
You're right. And look, I'm as impatient as you are. I'm not here to be at all defensive about that. And we do need to be moving quicker. And I want to assure you that we're going to accelerate progress on this important initiative. AR-15s are deadly. They're used in tragedies for their deadly force. And that has to be the singular motivation to see that the process of launching this program begins in great haste. And that's why we are going to be expanding on how we're going to set up the compensation system as quickly as we possibly can, and then rolling it out. And despite the fact that there are challenges, despite the fact that it is unprecedented, we are going to move mountains to get it done.
I want to also ask about some of the criticism that comes from the Conservative Party around is your government tackling this in the right manner? And more specifically, the idea that, and I understand why your government moved on mandatory minimums, but that you brought in some gun-related crimes and essentially allowed for the reduction in sentences for that. Is that the right move? Is that something that your government needs to reconsider? I understand that mandatory minimums were disproportionately affecting, minority communities. I understand that argument that obviously has, been made elsewhere through many studies that, parts of it have been deemed unconstitutional. But when the end result is a series of gun crimes end up being faced with people who commit those crimes being faced with lesser sentences than they would have previously, is that not sending the wrong message?
Vashi, the legislation that my colleague Minister Lametti is shepherding through Parliament to get rid of the failed mandatory minimum policy, which has been time and time again struck down by the Supreme Court, has been resolved. And it does lead to very negative consequences, including the overrepresentation of racialized and Indigenous peoples in our jails. And that has to stop. And you can reconcile the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court of Canada, while at the same time taking a serious and responsible approach when it comes to organized crime. And that's why we have put in place additional measures which will give police the tools that they need to get at gun crime, by providing them, for example, with additional wiretap powers, by providing them with additional resources at the border to stop the illegal trafficking of guns in the first instance. And we've made a lot of progress on that front. As you probably heard, we had a record number of illegal firearm seizures last year, but there's still a long way to go. And that's why we're putting in place these concrete and practical measures. At
the same time, Minister, gun violence, as your government just explained in this announcement, has actually increased. In effect, what you introduce with mandatory minimums, if you take the whole argument about mandatory minimums for a second and put it aside, reduces the penalties for 13 different gun offenses in this country. Is that not a problem?
Well, look, we put faith in the courts to make sure that those serious offenders who bring about harm and pain and anguish and loss caused by guns will place as a paramount objective the protection of society. And that is an important delineating difference between the approach that we take as a government and the approach that the Conservatives had previously taken. At the same time, today you heard me say that we're going to be introducing more significant penalties, raising the maximum penalties for those serious offenders. And why? Because we want to denounce and we want to deter those individuals from committing those crimes. And you can reconcile the two by putting faith in our judiciary to dispense justice and by sending a signal to criminals, particularly those who participate in organized crime, that if they use a gun to hurt, seriously injure, or kill people, then there will be appropriate consequences.
Okay, Minister, I'm out of time. I have to leave it there. Thanks very much for making time for us this evening.
Thank you, Vashi.
Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.